It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and join us to talk about a great new resource on the Rosary. It's Praying the Rosary with St. John Paul II. Thanks for being here, Gretchen Crowe.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
It's my pleasure. Have you heard about the new Click to Pray e-Rosary?
Yes, I have.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's definitely different. I would never say, I would never say any way that brings us to the Rosary and to Jesus through Mary is always wonderful, right? But it definitely is different.
Yeah, I thought it was a joke at first, but looks like it's a real thing. A little digital rosary that you wear around your wrist like a smart watch or something like that.
I think it even tracks your steps.
Yeah, multi-purpose. So with your reflections here with St. John Paul II, do you have a favorite memory of St. John Paul II?
Yes, actually, when I was reading this book, I did a lot of research on his life, and I read George Weigel's, fantastic biography, Witness to Hope. And most of my life and most of our lives, John Paul was Pope. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know a lot about him. I wasn't as familiar with him prior to his election to the papacy. And so writing this book was an opportunity to go back and learn a little bit more about his early life, his relationship with his parents, especially his father, his relationship with a group of young people really stood out to me. When he was a young priest, he served as kind of a mentor, a confidant to this young group of men and women who were seeking holiness, who were seeking to live lives of virtue. Mm-hmm. And so he would counsel them in chastity and sexuality and responsible parenthood and everything that eventually would grow into what we now know as theology of the body.
Right.
But he was really living that in his early life as a priest, a young priest in Poland. And he would spend time with this group of people, and they would do things. They would go outside. They would camp in the woods, and so they would, be recreating and things together as friends. But he was always kind of set apart too as a mentor, a counselor, a confidant, and I really enjoyed reading about that time.
What inspires you most about his life?
He was a man who practiced what he preached, and there's an authenticity and a witness that the church greatly needs. And I found while I was writing this book, I had an opportunity to reflect on the way that he embodied virtue. In the book, I center each mystery kind of on a spiritual fruit of the Rosary as introduced by St. Louis de Montfort centuries ago. But I reflect on how John Paul embodied that spiritual fruit. That was a great gift. So how did John Paul embody the virtue of humility, of love of the poor, love of neighbor, conformity to God's will, patience and carrying our cross, all of those things that each of us is called to strive for, he lived out. And it was I think that's what makes this book really special, is that, yes, we have John Paul's writings on the mysteries, and those are included in the book as well. I picked out a writing per mystery, and I think that's really significant and important and can help you in your prayer life. But this witness of John Paul showing how he lived virtue and lived virtuously is inspirational, I think, as you pray the Rosary.
So how hard was it for you to find a reflection from St. John Paul II for each of these? Mm-hmm. Because they come from all different sources. It's not like you just found a book of Rosary reflections and pulled them from his writings on this or something like that. This is really quite the scavenger hunt, it seems like.
You know what? It really was. With the internet these days, it's a lot easier, sure, of course, than it would have been 20 years ago, to have to kind of sift through his writings, in print. But digitally, it makes that a lot easier. But definitely there were certain mysteries where I ordered special books, made sure, that I found where he was writing on a particular mystery, because I didn't want them just to kind of fill in the blank, he mentioned agony in the garden here once, so right, I'm just going to put this in. I wanted it to be, he was really reflecting on this mystery. And so, yeah, that definitely, it took time. It took patience. It took kind of creativity in looking for resources. But I think what the result is, I hope what the result is a really nice compilation of that. So no one else has to go look for them.
Right.
They're collected and they're in this book. And I really hope that it's the best of what he had to say on each mystery.
Was there a particular mystery or group of mysteries that you found that he spoke a lot on? Maybe some that he was particularly attracted to?
Well, I would say probably the joyful mysteries. I mean, those are so kind of ubiquitous. You know, you've got every year you're going to talk about the Nativity of the Lord at Christmas, right? They're just some that you speak about more, I think, within the liturgical calendar.
Right.
So I think probably the joyful, I would have to say.
We're talking with Gretchen Crowe. The book is Praying the Rosary with St. John Paul II. When you talk about praying the Rosary with St. John Paul II, are you thinking like we are praying it along with him because he is praying the Rosary as well, or we pray the Rosary with his reflections in mind as we pray, or what did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think there can be two ways that you can do this. As you're praying the Rosary, of course, we're praying to Jesus through Mary, but we're looking for the witness, looking at the witness and the example and the words of John Paul to help us again center our prayer on Jesus, center our reflections on Jesus. He loved Mary because he believed in his heart that Mary was one of the best ways to form a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so really when I say we're praying with St. John Paul II, we're looking at his life. We're looking at how he was brought to Jesus through Mary and inspired then, hopefully, to live that way ourselves. And we're also reflecting on the mysteries with him. So as we mentioned, each mystery has an excerpt from a talk or a homily or a writing letter that reflects each mystery. And so when you're meditating when you're praying the Rosary and meditating on the mysteries, there are some different things you can do. You can pray and meditate on the spiritual fruits and how John Paul embodied those. Or you can read the reflections on the mysteries and center on those and help. But no matter which way you do it, the goal, of course, is to draw closer to Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Which came first? Were you reflecting on the mysteries of the Rosary? Like, you know what? St. Pope John Paul really embodied a lot of these attributes and he'd be a great one to reflect on. Or were you reading and reflecting on St. John Paul's life and thought, hey, this would be a great tie-in with the Rosary?
So really, I think the inspiration for this book came from my last book, which was Why the Rosary, Why Now? It came out a couple of years ago.
Sure.
And in it, I focused on several prominent people within the church and showed how the Rosary is needed now more than ever in the world. And one of the people that I focused on was John Paul II. And I took an excerpt from his wonderful apostolic letter, Rosarium Virginis Mariae. And of course, within that, he introduces the luminous mysteries. And it basically is a love letter to Mary and to Jesus through Mary. And he had such a devotion to her that I thought it would be a really wonderful to look at all of the ways that he pointed people to Jesus through Mary throughout his pontificate, yes, but also throughout his life. Being Pope for 26 years, he influenced and inspired generations of Catholics. And he continues to do so today, I truly believe. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to kind of highlight all of that. So yeah, that was really important to me. I would say the inspiration came from my first book, and I'm wanting to continue to highlight just how much what kind of impact that he had on the church through the Rosary.
Sure. Can you give us an example of one of the mysteries and how you wove in the teaching or the example of JP2 into the praying of that mystery?
Sure. I can start with the first joyful mystery, which is the Annunciation of the Lord. The spiritual fruit, as outlined by St. Louis de Montfort, is humility for that mystery. So St. Louis de Montfort, who was alive in the 17th, 18th century, and had a deep, deep devotion to Mary, believed that it was, an opportunity while praying the Rosary to be able to focus on living a life of virtue. And so humility was what he outlined for the Annunciation. Of course, Mary's great humility at saying yes to the Lord, not knowing what it was going to mean for her life. So I exemplify John Paul. I talk about, and you probably remember this, and many listeners probably remember this, but John Paul, every country to which he traveled, he would, when he got off the airplane, he would kneel on the ground and kiss, if it was an airport, the tarmac, he would kiss the ground after he arrived. And it was I mentioned in the book that he learned that from St. John Vianney, who did something similar. But that kissing the ground was a sign of great humility. Here he is, the Pope, traveling to a different country. He's all this fanfare that goes along with him, all the attention that comes along with that. And yet, what did he do? He got down on his knees. He knelt, he kissed the ground, a sign of great humility, but it also conveyed a respect for the country that he was visiting, a respect for the people that he was visiting, and showed him to be a man of service to others and love and respect for others.
Well, this is such a neat resource, and as a nice little book, it's got a nice bio of St. Pope John Paul II at the beginning, as well as a reflection on all of the mysteries, and also great pictures, too, of Pope St. John Paul II in there. So definitely encourage people to pick this up. Where is the best place to get not only this book, but your past books as well?
Sure. So you can go to OSV, that's for our Sunday visitor, OSV, CatholicBookstore.com has both of those books available there. And of course, it's available on Amazon.
All right. Again, this one's Praying the Rosary with St. John Paul II. Thank you so much, Gretchen Crowe, for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much, Kyle.